tuning in, and thanks to Northland for hosting us. Leah and I both are assistant naturalists at the Latodami Nature Center. We're going to talk to you today about an exciting new program that we have developed in partnership with the North Area Environmental Council, NAEC, that hopefully at the end you are as interested and excited about it as we are, and you sign up. But before we get into that, we wanted to make sure that everybody knows what the Latodami Nature Center is. So a little bit about the Latodami Nature Center. So we are a part of North Park, and being from the North Hills, as I suspect most of you are, you're probably very familiar with North Park, but you'd be amazed how many people are very familiar with North Park, but don't necessarily make it over to the Nature Center because we're sort of tucked away in a little corner of the park. But the Nature Center is over by the ice skating rink by Brown Road, on Brown Road, but it's sort of off the beaten path. And it became part of the park in 1969 when it was purchased from the family that owned the former farm, and made part of North Park. Previous to that, it was a 250-acre working farm. The barn that we use as our main building with our exhibits and our classroom is a former dairy barn that was built in 1914. And what I think is really cool about the Nature Center is the 250 acres that was the old farm that is now the Nature Center. It actually goes from where that barn is and where our pond is on Brown Road all the way to 19 where the Wendy's is. So that's how big that farm was. It encompasses that whole complex. That's the soccer fields, and but it actually it possesses practically every type of habitat that's that you can find in Western PA. We have obviously plenty of woodlands like we all do, which is normal for Pennsylvania now. But we also have some very large fields and meadows that were, formerly used to graze the livestock and raise crops. We have that pond that I referenced, but we also have a stream running through the property. We have wetlands. So we have all kinds of, pretty much every type of habitat you'd like to see is on the Nature Center property. And obviously our primary objective is education. So we do programming on and off site for the public mainly, but we do private and schools. Haven't done schools much in the last 2 years, but hopefully we'll be resuming that in the future. Do a lot of work with scout groups. And so, education is very important for our mission. And the other thing I wanted to mention about the Nature Center is that we have plenty of opportunities for folks to volunteer. They can volunteer and help with habitat restorations. We do litter cleanups. We do a lot of citizen science projects. We have over 350 bluebird boxes in the park that are monitored by volunteers. Almost 50 volunteers actually visit these boxes weekly and monitor them. So we have all kinds of different things that people can get involved in. Next. And how you can get involved. This will be our last Nature Center slide, but how you can get involved is you can get on our mailing list. And to do that, you can send an email to this email address I listed here. Or if you have your smartphone, you can take a picture, use your camera to focus on that QR code on the screen. And that'll bring up a form that you could fill out, and you would be on our mailing list. And that's an emailing list. And we send out an email once a month, and that email has, all the programs that are coming up, and good. We hope interesting nature facts, and so and another way to be plugged into the Nature Center is to follow us on Facebook if you're a Facebook user, and you can find us as latodami.com, or I'm sorry, Latodami Nature Center, and if you follow us there, practically any programming that we have coming up, as well as, again, a lot of nature tidbits and good photographs and things. We try to do postings almost every day. One of the things that we do that's kind of neat is that we have lots of nature hikes and walks. We actually have a nature hike that has been occurring on Thursday mornings. We had it just this morning. We meet at 10 o'clock. That's been happening since almost 1969. So and that's a walk with the naturalist, and we go to different parts of the park, and we just see what we can see. We do it all year round. 2 weeks ago, when I think it was in single digits, we had folks hiking. So, but we have that, and we've started to offer in the last several years the same type of hike, but in the evenings on Tuesday, the first and third Tuesday evenings. So for those folks that can't make a Thursday at 10. And we also bird walk. So again, if you're interested in these, I'd suggest you get plugged into the Nature Center. And as I mentioned before, plenty of volunteer opportunities. Next. Okay, lawn to nature. So today's environmental news isn't good. I mean, here's a sampling of some headlines that I just picked out of recent publications, and it's almost universally bad. We see the impacts of climate change, almost daily, and with extreme weather, we've experienced that definitely in this area, but it's being experienced across the world. Devastating and more frequent hurricanes, tornadoes, droughts, fires. And the thing that's really scary about the environmental news and this climate change is how fast things are happening. The first meeting of world leaders to talk about environmental issues and climate change occurred in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro, and it was called the Earth Summit. Well, since then, the global average temperature has increased 1.1 degrees Fahrenheit, which is more than it had increased the previous 110 years. And it's actually worse in the Arctic, where in Alaska, in that same period of time, temperatures increased 2.5 degrees. So what's that doing? Well, obviously it's melting the polar ices. And we've had 36 trillion tons of ice melt since 1992. And what does that mean? Well, that means the sea levels are rising, and they've risen 3.1 inches since that same time. In 1992, we had wildfires. On average, they would consume 2.7 million acres a year. And wildfires are actually a natural nature phenomenon. So, it's not distressing to have wildfires, but what is distressing is in the past 9 years, that number has tripled to 7.5 million acres a year that being burned. And, we certainly have seen the headlines with wildfires in the last 2 years in this country, mainly in the West, being just devastating. Next slide, Leah. And then, this change, this negative change isn't just impacting us humans, but it's really impacting everything that lives here. Insects particularly are in trouble. It's estimated that the total mass of insects is falling 2.5% a year. And 40% of the insect species are in decline, and 33% are endangered. And, we may think, insects, they're annoying. They buzz around my head. What's so bad about that? Well, unfortunately, without insects, the world doesn't work. I mean, without insects, plants go away. And when plants go away, then everything's over. And, people think, well, I don't like mosquitoes. And, well, we need insects. And unfortunately, mosquitoes aren't one of the species in decline. But with the insects in this decline, then sort of everything else is following the trends. And we've had reported in the last couple of years that in this country, in the last 50 years, we have lost a third of our bird population, 3 billion birds. So many believe we are facing what is considered to be the Earth's sixth great extinction event, and potentially one of the most severe. Next. And all this, all this negative news is so overwhelming. It just seems so bad and so insurmountable that it has a paralyzing effect. It makes people say, what can I do about this? And what's really alarming is that it's really disturbing the young people. You can see this headline here that 75% of our young people say the future's frightening, and that's sad. That's very sad. But all this makes people, maybe think, what can I do about this? Well, next. enough doom and gloom. We're here to talk about not negative things happening in the environment, but what we think is positive environmental news and what you can do about it. This is Doug Talame. He is a professor of entomology at the University of Delaware, and he's been studying insects and their interrelationship with the natural world all his life. And he's written a multitude of books, many with the same themes, but his most, well, it's actually now no longer his most recent, but his one that came out in the last year or so, Nature's Best Hope, is the one that talks about his message. And his message is really exciting because it's hopeful and it's actionable. It's a way that we can turn this negative trend that I just talked about around, and it's a way we all can participate in it. And that's what we are very excited about at the Nature Center, and that's what we're trying to talk about with you here. And really his message is that we all need to get involved and we need to bring nature home. Next. So how do we do that? Well, just to, and just to be fair, I'm going to attempt in several slides to summarize Doug's movement and Doug's book. So I'm very unlikely to do it justice. And we are going to have a short video by Doug, but I'm going to just give you sort of the highlights, and then we'll go from there. But his points are that our conservation movement, to date, has been focused on preserving nature in public places, and it really has been within the control of professionals. And that was wonderful because that did allow us to create our national park systems and our national forest, and those are wonderful assets we have in this country. But the problem with that concept is that only 17% of our land is public, and 83% is privately owned. So it's the reverse 80-20 rule. We're focused on the minority here, and it just isn't enough land. And then historically, as Europeans came to this country and colonized it, as everyone came to this country and colonized it, that process was basically adversarial with nature. Nature was something to be beaten back so that we can create our cities and create our farms and our rangelands. And so our relationship with nature, to date has been pretty much a combative one. So, but what Doug's trying to tell us is that if we want to change this, we're going to have to focus our efforts on private land, and it's going to have to be everyone's responsibility to be involved in this if it's going to work. And so how are we going to do something like this? Well, we're going to talk, and Leah's going to give you the details on this in a minute, but we're going to talk about how you can convert a portion of your yard into a native plant garden. Next. Okay, so lawns. Lawns are funny things. And I like this meme here because it sort of talks about where lawns came from. Well, lawns go back to the Middle Ages, and really what they became, what they were, was a status symbol that says if you were a wealthy landowner and you were wealthy enough to actually allow some of your land to not be productive, and then you pretty much arrived, and you had to have somebody tend that, but you were able to take some of your land and make it grass, and that became sort of a status symbol. And I think that, obviously that came to this country because lawns in the United States are right up there with apple pie and the mom. It's just, and it's sort of ingrained in our nature that we have to have a nice lawn. But lawns are high maintenance, and they need lots and lots of water. It's in the United States, we use 8 billion gallons of water a day on our lawns, which equates to 32 gallons a day per person, and which is estimated to be 30% of the water we use in the East and 60% in the West. And we also put a lot of chemicals on our lawns. And what's really scary is that 40% of these chemicals that we put on our lawns are banned in Europe as cancer causing. And that's really frightening if you think about the fact that, we're putting chemicals on our lawns, and then our kids and our dogs and our cats are running outside and playing on them. But unfortunately, only 40 to 60% of those chemicals stay on these lawns. The rest, 40 to 60% of the chemicals put on these lawns don't stay, but they run off and they get into the groundwater, we get into the surface water, and eventually get into our watersheds. The Pennsylvania is actually introducing a lawn conversion program as well in the parallel, well, not in parallel, but they're doing their own program, and they're doing it because they're under federal mandate to clean up the pollution that's going into the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And a lot of that pollution is coming from our yards and our lawns in addition to our farms. And of course, we got to cut early. If you have a lawn and you got to water it, you got to treat it, but you also got to cut it. So it's estimated that we spend 70 hours a year putzing with our lawns, and they're expensive. It's a $30 billion business for lawn care a year, and we use 1.5 billion gallons of gas to run lawnmowers and other machinery. So, and the thing that's really bad about lawns is that they're ecological deserts. So, they may be pleasing to us aesthetically, but they really provide no benefit whatsoever to the ecosystems that run the natural world. They're not much different than concrete. So what we're saying here is that we don't need to eliminate our lawns. I mean, that would be radical. I don't think that could ever fly. But what we're saying is, let's start the process of trying to reintroduce native plants by converting some of our lawns into a native garden. Next. And another issue that we have to contend with is invasive species. And what's an invasive species? Well, it's a plant or an animal that's from somewhere else. In our case, a lot of times that's from Asia or from Europe. And unfortunately, these plants aren't recognized by local wildlife when they're brought here. And so nothing really eats them, nor does anything, when they don't eat them, they don't host them on, they can't be host plants for insects as well. So they provide real no benefit, but also because nothing eats them, they often can spread unchecked. If you go to a nursery or a big box store and you look around for the plants that they're selling there, you look at the shrubs, and most of what you will see there is a non-native plant. And these three pictures here are what we may argue could be in our FBI top 5 wanted list. On the left up there is stiltgrass. Stiltgrass actually wasn't brought in as a plant for our yards, but actually was brought in as packing material, but it is now all over our woods. The one on the right is barberry, and barberry, again, that was and till this day is still a popular landscape plant, but barberry is now all through our woods as well because it spreads very aggressively. And in the lower right hand corner is Oriental Bittersweet, and that's a vine that goes all over everything. So where do these plants come from? Well, they come from us. They come from our yards. It's estimated that 80% of what's in our yards is in our woods in terms of invasives have come from our yards. Next. So here's some pictures of our woods. I took these pictures hiking around North Park in the fall, and really you can see that everywhere you look, and if you go anywhere in Allegheny County, our woods are going to look like this. They're just filled with invasive species. On the left hand side, you can see the trees are covered, and that's bittersweet covering those trees. Those the lower pictures there, that brown laying over everything, that's stiltgrass that this time of the year is laying on the ground just like a dead carpet. The middle pictures is woods field. It's actually a hiking trail that goes through just acres of barberry. And then you can see here the top 10 plants that are invasives that are in our woods. But the other issue with invasives is really our deer problem that we have. And Lawn to Nature is not going to do anything about a deer problem, but it's sort of a 1-2 punch that a normal healthy deer population is 10 to 15 per square mile. Well, in our area, that we have more like 70 to 100, and they have that's way too many deer, and they have completely overbrowsed our woods and our understory. Do they eat invasives? No. they don't. So the invasives, are pretty much what have replaced native understory, but they will eat any native plant tree coming up or any shrub, and they pretty much have. And so, so the deer are out there sort of wiping out any native plants, and then what fills that vacuum? Well, the invasives do. So it's a 1-2 punch that we have in this area. Next. So what we need to do to try to turn this around is we need to go native. And we'll talk about why native plants, why they're important. Well, insects, particularly larvae and caterpillars, are the foundation of our food webs. And 96% of birds feed their young insects. So even birds that you're getting on your feeders now, that chickadees and titmice that are coming to your feeders and eat seed all day long, in the summer they're out finding insects to give to their babies. Why caterpillars? Why are caterpillars so important to these birds? Well, there's a bunch of reasons for that. They're soft, and that's important because if you've ever seen a parent bird feed a baby, they fly in and ram something in an open mouth and turn around and go do it all over again all day long. And if they were ramming a seed in there, or they were ramming a berry in there, or even a grasshopper, they'd probably be choking that poor little bird. But when they do caterpillars, they can stuff them in their mouths and they can ingest them. And caterpillars they're really nutritious. They're full of proteins and fats and beta carotenes. So they're just wonderful, and they're big. They actually, one caterpillar would be the equivalent of 200 aphids. So if you're a bird, what would you rather do? Gather one caterpillar or go get a whole bunch of aphids? And the nice thing is, if you have the right habitats, caterpillars are all over the place, because if you can imagine, these birds are doing this all day long. They don't want to go far, so they need to have ready access to this. And this is all good because birds need a lot of these to raise a family. Chickadees, these little tiny birds that we all know, they can have 6 to 8 eggs in a nest, sometimes more. It will take them 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to raise that nest from when they hatch to when they fledge, which usually is about 3 weeks. They may have to gather 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to feed those babies to the point that they can leave. And when they leave, they're not done feeding them, because they still help them when they're outside the nest. But so they need a lot of caterpillars. And what's really ironic is that a lot of birds, including chickadees, will actually have multiple broods, sometimes up to 3 in a season. So that's a lot of caterpillars. And the other thing that's important to note is that 96% of our insects are specialists. And what that means is they need a specific plant to raise their larvae on. And the reason that is because plants don't want to be eaten. They actually, over eons of time, develop all kinds of different mechanisms, chemical mechanisms, to fight off anybody eating them. And alongside that, the insects that have co-evolved with these plants, they develop workarounds so they can eat them. And but this kind of relationship takes just thousands of generations and hundreds of thousands of years to develop. Certain native plants we call keystone species because they are the best. They actually host the most different species of any of them, of any plants. And the top of that list are oaks. Oak trees actually will host up to 557 different species of moths and butterflies. Cherries and willows are very good keystone species as well, and they'll host up to 400 different types. An invasive tree like a ginkgo that you may be familiar with, it's actually a popular street tree. It comes from Asia originally. They're nice trees, but they will only host 1 to 2 different types of insects. So you can get a sense that native trees, oaks, cherries, willows, and there's others, those are keystone because they're really required in order to support a healthy insect population. And then some people might say, well, won't these insects adapt to these new, ginkgo tree or something that's been introduced? And the answer is yeah, they will in hundreds of thousands of years. That's how long it takes for them to recognize and I think, because how would any of us know? But it takes that long for you to develop the ability to use a plant as a host. And so unfortunately, these invasives and the timeframes that we're worried about are going to be of no use to insects. Next. And probably the best example of and the one that we probably will recognize the most of this relationship between insects and their host plants is the monarch butterfly. I think everyone recognizes monarchs. You can see this video in the middle is a monarch on a plant in my backyard. But everybody knows this iconic butterfly. You can see its caterpillar on the left. What's kind of interesting is that their host plant is milkweed. And milkweed to practically everything else is toxic, but to the monarch, they can eat it because they've developed the ability to ingest it without being affected by its toxins. But what's more remarkable is not only does it not be affected by its toxins, it actually can incorporate them into its own tissues and actually uses that as defenses against predators as well. But another thing that's really, I think, cool about monarchs and their caterpillars is that if you've ever seen milkweed broken leaf and you've seen its sap, you'll understand why it's been named milkweed, because it's white, and as soon as it hits the air, it starts to set up, and it looks like Elmer's glue. And you think, how can anything eat that without basically gluing its mouth shut? Well, what a monarch caterpillar will do is it'll start chewing on a leaf, and if it starts to draw that white sap, it'll walk up that leaf and it'll chew through the main rib and cut off the sap flow, and then go back and finish off that leaf. So just amazing some of the relationships that are out there that have developed for them to be able to use a particular plant as host. And if you if you are fortunate enough to have milkweed in your yard, you'll notice too that monarchs aren't unique to using milkweed as their host. There's milkweed beetles and milkweed bugs, and typically there's milkweed tussock moths. I mean, there are a host of different insects that use milkweeds, and that plant is just teeming with life. But unfortunately, specialization can be a curse as well, because if something happens to a host plant, then that insect's in trouble, because they just can't pivot to a different plant, start eating it. If milkweed's not available, then they will die. And unfortunately, that's what's happening with monarchs. This iconic insect that we all recognize, probably one of the most recognizable insects in the world, its population has declined 96% in the last 50 years. And it's just amazing to me to think that this insect's on the brink of extinction, mainly because of the decline in milkweed and availability of host plants. So, okay, so that was my attempt to summarize Doug's message. Next, Leah. But what I'm going to do is let you hear a little bit from him. I just want to give you a little preface on this. It was hard to find a short video of Doug Tallamy. It was easy to find 1 hour long ones, but I didn't think you guys wanted to do a 2-hour presentation. But this one captures a lot of the same points that we're making. But this one is an earlier video where he was a little focused on meadow development. The message now has sort of morphed to lawn development, which I think is a better message, because more people are in a position to create a small native garden with a lawn portion of their lawn than to create a meadow. So I think that's kind of neat, but I'll let him tell you the rest. And when I'm done, Lee is going to take over and tell you about our Lawn to Nature kit that we've developed to represent these principles.
Animals. Absolutely every animal on this planet gets its food directly from plants. Gets its food either by eating a plant or by eating something else that ate the plant. And that's because plants are the only organisms that can capture the sun's energy and turn it into food. The most important group of animals that take energy from plants and pass it to other animals are the insects that eat plants. We'll call them insect herbivores. And most insect herbivores are only able to eat a particular group of plants, and we call that specialization. They can only eat the plants that they have co-evolved with because plants defend themselves with nasty chemicals, and it takes long periods of time for insects to develop the physiological ability to digest those chemicals. When we create a meadow, we are in effect restoring an ancient food web. This works best if we use the native plants that were originally part of that food web. We'd like to favor native plants because the insect herbivores that evolved where you want to put your meadow evolved in concert with those native plants. They have specialized on those native plants over many, many thousands of years, which have enabled those insects to eat them. Those same insects have no evolutionary exposure to plants that evolved in China or Europe. They won't be able to eat these plants. They won't be able to digest them. They won't even recognize them as food plants. So if you're creating a meadow, choose plants that are native to your area, the country. A good example of an insect that specializes on one group of plants because of that plant's chemistry is our friend the monarch butterfly. It eats milkweeds and nothing else because it's able to break down the nasty chemicals that are in milkweeds, but it's unable to digest any other type of plant. If we cut milkweeds down then, monarch larvae cannot crawl off and eat some other type of plant. So if we destroy the plants that these insect herbivores have specialized on, they will have nothing to eat and will be doomed to extinction. So stop and think about it. So many animals depend on insects for their food. All amphibians, for example, eat insects. So do many reptiles and rodents. And 96% of our terrestrial birds rear their young on insects. If we replace our native plants with non-native plants, then all of those animals won't have enough to eat. And that'll hit biodiversity very hard. And of course, that's exactly what we've done by creating lawns and landscaping with non-native plants that evolved outside of our local ecosystems. So remember what a meadow is all about. It's not just a beautiful place, but it's a place where things can live. Living things have two requirements. They need food and they need a place to live. Your meadow provides both. It provides food because of the plants that you put in your meadow. And if you put many different types of plants in your meadow, you'll have a diversity of food for a diversity of insects, and you'll have a diversity of natural enemies that will eat those insects. And the meadow provides habitat, hiding places, those little niches where the birds and the other meadow creatures can nest and rear their young. Planting a native wildflower meadow is so much more beautiful and dynamic, both structurally and in terms of species, than planting a monoculture such as a lawn. Somebody once said that gardening is a way of showing that you believe in tomorrow. And I think that's never been more true than today, because the way we garden, the way we create places like meadows, is going to determine what life looks like tomorrow.
All right. So now to introduce the Lawn to Nature program itself. So this is a project that myself, Ken, and Teresa Petrozinski, a fellow intern from this summer, we created Lawn to Nature, which is a program designed to convert lawn space into an ecologically useful wildlife hub. The North Area Environmental Council was kind enough to help us develop Lawn to Nature and bring it to all of you. So what is Lawn to Nature? A Lawn to Nature program is a kit that includes seeds and instructions on turning a portion of your lawn space into a primarily native wildlife meadow, wildflower meadow to benefit our native pollinators and other critters. Native flowers, as well as native trees, hold terrific wildlife value in our increasingly invasive filled region. Participants will also be encouraged to remove invasives and reduce chemical use like lawn fertilizer and pesticides to keep our Ohio River watershed clean. So this is a little bit of what will be included in the Lawn to Nature kit. The first thing is, of course, the meadow seed mix. sourced locally from Ernst, which is north of us in Pennsylvania. And we will have options for both a sunny mix and a part shade mix. We will also include written and video instructions on how to convert your lawn space, have lots of fun goodies like stickers, bookmarks, stress balls, on a tote bag, and best of all, an 8x12 sign to show off, because nothing's more important than letting everyone know what this movement is all about. And for our inaugural sale, we will include a choice of a keystone tree or shrub. We are doing oak and chokecherry for this. And all of this is just $20. We'd like to take a moment to thank our suppliers, partners, and donors for this project. We are getting our seeds from Ernst. Our saplings are from Musser. We have been donated supplies by Ray Morris, along with the PA Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. And we are also getting a coupon in the kit from Arcadia Natives. They are in, I believe, Washington, PA, and they have a wonderful nursery of native plants that are pre-grown that you can add to your lawn. So why are we doing this? Well, conservation is our main goal. Compared to turf grass, deep-rooted plantings have positive impacts on water quality and flood control. These meadows will help our native animals as well by providing food and a safe place to live. So first off, it's great for our watershed to absorb runoff and act as a natural filter for chemical pollutants. Meadows will also help pollinators, birds, and other small animals by providing food, nesting habitats, and safe places to hide. These plantings also help connect together our current islands of habitat. So designated parks are great habitats, but large open lawns and dangerous roadways trap them inside of these habitats. So linking places together by adding more habitats to lawn space will help them migrate and expand their ranges. And best of all, it benefits us because we all like, as much as we like helping wildlife, it is nice to give ourselves something out of this. So it's very pretty. The seed mix will flower at different times of the seasons. And this will help our pollinators stay active year round, but that also means you have something nice to look at from spring to fall. And you get to show off to your neighbors as well with all these beautiful flowers. Your plantings will not only reduce the space you have to mow, but established gardens will need far less or even no water as native plants are adapted to this environment. Spending time in nature has been shown to improve mood, so make sure to go out and enjoy your space and all the life it attracts. Next up is a video put together by Teresa about how to install this garden on your property.
Hi, I'm Leah. Hi, I'm Teresa, and we're interns at Latodami Nature Center, and we're here to show you how you can convert your lawn to this using Latodami Nature Center's Lawn to Nature Seed Kit Mix. To start off, the materials needed right now are a tarp that covers your preferred size of your pollinator garden and bricks or large rocks to weigh the tarp down. In your designated spot, you will need to cut the grass down as short as you can get it with either a lawnmower or weed eater. This is to allow a faster and more accurate process of eliminating your grass. Place the tarp on top of your area and weigh it down with bricks or large rocks so it will not move or blow up. After waiting at least 2 weeks and periodically checking under your tarp, it will be time to remove your tarp completely. During this step, you will want to make sure you have at least a shovel with you and also a rake if you have one. This can allow you to till or spade your grass by hand if you do not have a motorized tiller. After taking the tarp off, you may still notice certain spots or areas of grass that have not dried up. It is good to remove those pieces and try your best to get them out at the root to prevent them from growing back. If the grass patches appear to be more than what is shown in the video or may be too hard to get out, put the tarp back on it for a few more days and periodically check until the grass is dried up. After removing any excess grass that was left over, rake and spade your area to break up the dirt. If you have another method that does not use any type of herbicide and may get this job done a different way, feel free to use that as well. The materials needed for this step include a measuring tape and at least 4 tiny flags or markers that are visible. Once the grass has been fully eliminated and the land has been tilled, it is best to mark your perimeter or space where the pollinator garden will grow. Here we are doing a 10 by 10 square foot plot, as that is what one seed kit equals, but feel free to measure any way that you may choose. The materials needed for this step include an empty Parmesan cheese container, a filler such as sand or potting soil, and of course, your seed kit mix. After getting your seed kit mix, it is best to add a filler so the seed is evenly distributed through the plot of land you are choosing to use. Here we are using sand as a filler and scooping into the Parmesan cheese container after emptying the seed packet. We suggest filling the container with the additional filler to the top with about 1/4 to 1/2 inch left empty to allow an easier space to mix it all together. Once the sand is set, shake the Parmesan cheese container to get everything mixed together and make sure your container is closed tight to avoid any possible spillage. In this step, take your seed and filler mixture and spread it across your area of land. We suggest doing it in rows or in an organized manner to allow even distribution of the seeds. If it is too windy during the day, it may be best to wait until the wind is gone so the seed mixture does not blow away while you are spreading it. In this step, you will need a rake and most importantly, a pair of feet. This can be your own feet, your children's feet, or your dog's paws. The rake will be helpful for even distribution and to till the land to make sure the seeds stay put. If a rake is not accessible, your feet can do an even better job. Simply walk around the area, making sure to cover the land where the seeds were put. Make sure to not run or kick up any dirt too much so no seeds are lost. In this step, you will need a form of top dressing. This can come in the form of potting soil, straw, or a mixture of both. You'll be using both in this step to allow for proper and safe coverage. This is to allow the seeds and ground to absorb as much moisture as possible. This also allows birds to not have access to open seeds. We filled a 5-gallon bucket of potting soil and spread it evenly across. If you choose to use straw, then the same process goes for that as well. Keep spreading until the area is covered. If doing a mixture of both potting soil and straw, we advise doing the potting soil first, then adding the straw on top. When putting the potting soil and the straw on top of the land, it is also advised to walk on it after to pack it all in and keep the seeds safe. In this final step, you will need some form of a watering device, either a hose or a watering can. After putting the top dressing on, water the area immediately after. Repeat your watering technique once a day if it does not rain. It is always best to water in the morning before peak sunlight so all the water does not get dried up. If it appears to be more of a drought and rain has not come down for over a week, watering twice a day may be helpful. After this step, you have successfully completed the startup of your pollinator garden. Congratulations! Now comes the exciting time to wait for your garden to start blooming.
All right. So here are some photos, examples of some of pollinator gardens. So these are by Ken Knapp, Katie Stanley, and Ray Morris. These are examples of some of the plants that you may find in our seed mix and how they end up. So these are beautiful gardens with beautiful flowers. These meadow kits will include a mix of annuals as well to give you the reward of a beautiful garden your first year. After your first year, some annuals may reseed themselves and the perennials will start popping up. Successful meadows will be around for years to come. There is very little maintenance for an established garden. And here's some key dates for our project. So kits are available for purchase now. We will provide a link to order at the end of the presentation. And orders will be accepted through March 31st. These orders can be done online or through mail-in with a check. And all of this is alongside the NAEC's annual seedling sale. So be sure to keep checking on their website to see when their seedlings are available. They will have extra chokecherry and oaks, as well as other native plants that will be great for your gardens. So back to Ken to hear about some of the other ways you can improve your lawn space.
Okay, thanks, Leah. I love the video that Leah and Teresa put together on sort of a how-to. We've become a video society, and that was a good 6-minute how-to video on how to make a garden. And the gardens you saw there, mine was not, the Ray Morris garden and the Katie Stanley garden were created last spring, and the pictures you saw there were from, I think it was probably midsummer, July, maybe early August. So, it could look like that in your first year. Our seed mix is actually going to have, it's mainly going to be perennials, but we are going to have annuals in it, because we recognize that, the perennials are going to be there year after year, and a lot of annuals reseed themselves, but perennials often take more than 1 year to really pop. So we wanted to have the annuals in there because we want everybody to have, a really attractive garden from year one. And again, the gardens of Katie's and Ray's will show you that within a few short months, you follow these steps, you can have 100 square feet of covered with plants and flowers. But in addition to that, there's a bunch of things you could do to bring nature home that we wanted to talk about. And Doug touched on this in his video, and it's really about providing shelter and providing sustenance. And shelter could come in many different forms. You could see here that that you could put up bird boxes. Here on the left-hand page is a picture of one of our bluebird boxes from the Nature Center, and a couple of pictures of baby birds in that box. So we have almost 350 of these boxes in the park that we have people monitoring. It's pretty cool. But so you can put up birdhouses, and they could be homes, and you can put up bee boxes as well, so for native bees to live in. But there's other ways you could provide habitat as well for wildlife to live in. And this picture here in the middle, what people say, why has he got a picture of dead trees? Well, those are 2 dead blue spruces in my backyard. Fortunately, not near anything, because eventually they are going to fall over. But these dead trees provide me more entertainment than Netflix does on some nights, because if you look at them with binoculars, they're filled with birds, and they're filled with birds because they're filled with insects. And these trees, and in the middle of the summer when the regular tree has all their leaves on, you can't see any birds. It's kind of fun to look into this dead tree and see all the things that are coming and living in it. And on the right hand side, there's a picture of a brush pile. I have a pretty big property, and unfortunately, much to my wife's disappointment, I have a whole bunch of these brush piles all around. So I never get rid of any sticks. I just put them in a pile. And brush piles are great habitats for lots of things to live in. Again, insects. Many insects are decomposers. So as soon as anything dead comes around, they start working on it. And then, as we've been talking about, insects are the basis for lots of food webs. So once there's insects, then there's lots of other things. But the other thing that you could do in your yard to make it more nature friendly, and this is another radical concept to the traditional way of doing things, but it's to leave your leaves. And because, when we talk about having native plants and allowing them to be hosts for insects to reproduce on, one of the things that's important to recognize is that a lot of these insects are going to be, their eggs are going to be laid in these trees, and they're going to come out in larva form in these trees, and eventually they're going to fall out of these trees and pupate either in the leaves that are underneath the trees, or they'll crawl into the ground. And so if you get rid of your leaves, your leaves are filled with all kinds of things that are either in pupate form, or they could be caterpillars that overwinter. Woolly bears, for example, you'll find them in the spring, because right now they're somewhere in your leaves. If you compost, if you go and mow your leaves, then you're mowing a whole bunch of insects. And if you put them up in bags, then they'll end up in North Park's compost pile. But if you leave them, and again, I'm a crazy person, so I just leave my leaves under the trees. But if that's too much, or if you're in a neighborhood where that would be frowned upon, one of the things you could do is you can rake your leaves to the side, and you can still get the benefit of having those leaves provide all that habitat for those insects, and your nature native neighbors will be grateful. The other thing you could do is you can turn off your lights. Lights on all night are another killers for insects. If anybody has probably watched a porch light at night and just saw all the different moths and things banging away at that. Well, they're basically killing themselves when that occurs. So one of the things that's useful to promote insect health is to put your, if you turn out your lights if you can, but if you're concerned from a security perspective, put them on a motion detector so that they're not on constantly, or contemplate making the lights LED or yellow, which are not as detrimental to insects. And of course, is what we've been talking about all along. If your yard is, if your landscaping does have lots of non-natives, then we'd certainly recommend that that you start to contemplate, switching out those non-natives for natives, and that'll be certainly more nature friendly. Next. Leah?
There we go.
Okay, thank you. Another thing you obviously can do is to provide sustenance for to bring nature home, and that's obviously water. Water is very important. You can have bird baths. You can have, many folks in their backyards have little ponds, and those are very valuable to not just the fish in them, but birds and all kinds of different things. So that's a wonderful thing to provide. You can feed your birds. Many of us do this time of the year, put out seeds and suet and different things. But don't forget that you can feed your birds too. You don't have to put up bird feeders to do it. You can have native plants. Next. So if you do some of these cool things, then we certainly recommend that you pull up a chair and enjoy who comes by. And I want to tell you a little bit about some apps that, with the exception of Feeder Watch, are free, that you can use to sort of enjoy and track who's coming to your yards. iNaturalist is a really cool crowdsourced, massive nature database that it's basically, what I tell people, is like the equivalent of carrying a backpack full of nature guides outside, because how it works is you download this app, set up an account, you can do it in 5 minutes, and you take a picture of a flower like this. You take a picture and you submit that observation, and you send it in, and you do it instantly. You do it in the field. As long as you have a signal, you can do it. And iNaturalist will come back and they'll tell you what it thinks it is. And it's going to base that based on, this is just a massive database of millions and millions of observations, and it has an artificial intelligence. So it's learned what things are. So it's going to come back and tell you, I think it's, I think it's this because it looks like that, and it's been viewed in this area. So it's going to know that it's a native thing to the, it's expected in that area. So it's a wonderful thing to have if you just want to walk around the woods and understand, or walk around your yard and understand, what is this flower? What is this insect? What is this, animal? I mean, you can even record bird sounds, and it can identify things. But you could do some neat things with iNaturalist. I actually created a project called the Knapp Habitat, and because I wanted to use it to track what's coming to my yard, and so anything I do in my yard, I can actually attach to that project. And when I put this presentation together, I had 858 observations in the Knapp Habitat project, which was comprised of 442 different species. I had 60 bird species. Actually, when I wrote this, it was 60. I got one more this week, so now I have 61, and 15 different mammals. So it's really fun, if you do these kind of things to make your yard more nature friendly, to understand what's actually coming to your yard, and sort of sit back and enjoy viewing things. These other ones, eBird, Feeder Watch, Nest Watch, they are apps as well that are available from Cornell School of Ornithology, and they're very much bird oriented. If you do the things we're talking about, you're going to get a lot more birds in your yard. So, might as well start to look at them and enjoy them, get some binoculars, because they're lots of fun to watch. But eBird's another great app that'll allow you to track, what birds you're seeing. And Feeder Watch and Nest Watch are neat programs where you can actually, Feeder Watch, you will watch the birds that come to your feeder and record that and upload that. And Nest Watch is, you can do the same concept, but you do it with the nest in your yard and you can record that. And the thing that bear in mind is, this is fun for us to do to enjoy nature, but it's also very valuable because these are massive databases that are being used by scientists and academic people all around the world to collect data that they never would have got before. I mean, before this kind of thing existed, this was the work that was being done by grad students and things like that. Well, this is an opportunity for us to all be, citizen scientists for a day, and contribute to these different projects. Because what happens, like with iNaturalist, for example, if you do an observation and upload it, and people will come on and look at it and confirm it or not. And if you have two different people that will come and say, yeah, I agree with what you have identified here, that's considered scientific grade. And you've now contributed to science, to a scientific project potentially. So it's kind of fun, and it's really fun if you have kids. Next. Okay, so if you really go over the top and you're doing all these other things, well, you may be interested in some other certification programs that, so I'm going to spend a minute to tell you a little bit about some other things you can do. I'm going to start with certified wildlife habitat, because I think that's a good one for anyone to start with, because and all these come with a nominal fee. They're in the same, they're in the same ballpark of what we're charging for Lawn to Nature. But the certified wildlife habitat is kind of neat because it's self-administered. So you would download a checklist and fill that out. Based on your answers, they're going to tell you whether they can certify you as a wildlife habitat. And if you do the things that we've been talking about here tonight, then you will be certified. But it's a real good way for somebody to sort of get started. One program that we have here in this Allegheny County in Western PA that's kind of neat is the certified backyard habitat, which is done by the Audubon Society of Western PA. And what's neat about their program is if you signed up for them, they'll actually send a person out and they will audit your yard with you, and they will come back and give you, so you'll have a sort of a professional third person do that evaluation, and they'll come back and, if your yard is very nature friendly, you may get certified on the spot, or you may get a list of to-dos. And if you do those, you can be certified. But it's almost, and it's pretty inexpensive. So it's almost like hiring a consultant to say, how do I make my yard nature friendly? And a couple other ones that are kind of neat. Master Gardeners, they have a program that if you have a pollinator garden and you go through, again, it's sort of like the National Wildlife program where you self-certify. And if you meet certain criteria, then you can be deemed a pollinator garden. And then if you're fortunate enough to have milkweed in your garden, then you could potentially be considered a monarch way station. As we talked about earlier, monarchs require milkweed. And so the one thing I do want to mention is that, people it may even be in the chat, I haven't looked yet, but we don't have milkweed in our seed mix. And the reason we don't is because milkweed's hard to grow from seed. It's one of these plants that has to sit out and be in the weather before it can actually germinate. It needs to be stratified. So what I would recommend, if you do Lawn to Nature, you will get that wonderful certificate from Arcadia Natives, and you can use that to take a ride down to Washington and visit that wonderful new nursery and buy some milkweed. Because if you buy milkweed plants, they tend to do very well. And once you have milkweed, it will spread. Sometimes it can be aggressive, but I tell you, I don't know anybody that's installed milkweed or planted milkweed in their backyards that hasn't really enjoyed what's come by and enjoyed and lived on it. Okay, I think that might be it for our full program. So, okay, so before we get to questions, we'll do in a moment, we have a couple different ways that you can actually order Lawn to Nature. And as Leah mentioned, orders are open now. We're going to take orders through the end of March. You can scan this QR code. And again, with your smartphone, you use your camera to scan that, and it'll bring up the form that you can complete to do Lawn to Nature. Lawn to Nature ordering process is hosted by on the NAEC website, our partner in this. You can go to that. Leah's also listed the website, the URL for the website. Or if that's all too complicated and you're interested, you could send us an email and we'll walk you through it. So we certainly are interested in doing whatever we can do to make this as easy as possible for you. We're not doing this to make money. We're doing this to try to promote folks, bringing nature home, because we honestly think this is an exciting trend in the environmental trend that sort of needs to happen for us to try to reverse some of these negative things we talked about in the beginning. Before we go to questions, I'm just going to say, I don't know, can you see that, Leah?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the sign. We just got this today, so I brought it home and I wanted to show everybody on our webinar today. But this sign is one that you can install, and the sign's an important component of your garden, because if you live in a neighborhood, people are going to wonder what you're doing. And sometimes, in the first couple of months when you're killing your grass and you have a brown patch before you seeded it or before it's germinated, they're thinking, what the hell's going on here? Well, the sign sort of explains to people that this is intentional. I'm turning this into a native garden. And we actually have a QR code on our sign that people could scan, and this would give them information on Lawn to Nature as well. So it's also a way to promote it. But it's important to use signage, because you want to let folks know that you're doing this on purpose. This isn't neglect. This isn't failure to cut your grass. This is intentional. I'm trying to turn a part of my yard into a natural area that's more productive for all my neighbors that live in the woods and in the ground and up in the air. So anyways, that's Lawn to Nature. Let's go ahead and take a look at chat.
Yep. And I've also put the link to the order form in the chat as well, for anyone to just click on, ease of access.
Okay,
Our
so
first question is, doesn't straw have its own seeds? So hay typically would have more seeds than straw, and you can get straw that's sort of meant for covering up seeds. It's usually meant to cover grass seeds to make more lawn, but it applies to this purpose as well.
Yeah, straw by definition is typically a grass with the seed heads cut off. And the straw element is the stalks, and it's the non-productive. So if you get the right kind of straw, then you shouldn't really basically be growing 100 square feet of straw. It really does serve to hold the soil in place, keep the birds off, and next thing you know, your native plants are going to be popping through. And thanks, I'm glad you liked the video. Ooh, lawn chemicals. Well, yeah, lawn chemicals are a problem. There's a lot of things wrong with that. I can go on and on, but and unfortunately, if you are downhill from your neighbor, yes, you're gonna be affected by that. Not just your plants and things, but these chemicals aren't safe. I mean, it's just amazing to me what we do in this country that's permitted, that's hazardous to our children's and our pets' healths. But this whole lawn care industry has evolved because just our obsession with having a green lawn with nothing else in it. And because really, if you didn't want to do anything, the best thing you can do is not treat your lawn with herbicides and weed killers, and at least allow it to have some clover and some dandelions, because if nothing else, it'll provide a food source for pollinators. But heaven forbid we let those things occur. But I feel for you, because neighbors are you have to consider your neighbors when you're contemplating things like this. The hope would be we sort of do this as at a pun intended, I guess, grassroots level in terms of converting our lawns, and you have a lawn that that looks like Ray Morris in that first year, and people are going to come by and say, man, that's beautiful, and it's easy. Once you've done it, you don't have to do anything. My native plant garden that Leah showed on the slide, now it's also doubles as my run for my chickens. It's been, I did that several years ago, and I haven't watered or done anything to that since. And actually, the chickens run all through it. And it's, native plants are tough. They can put up with a lot. So you'll be amazed that, at the end of the day, doing this is actually easier. You're looking to make things a little easier on yourself. A native plant garden is the easiest thing you can have. Okay.
Yeah, it would also help if only one part of your yard is being affected by the chemical runoff, then just do your lawn to nature conversion in another part of your yard, or possibly even get more chemical resistant, hardier plants as a buffer. And that's part of why deep-rooted plants are great, is because they are sort of the way that wetlands and cattails in wetlands work. They will suck up the water that's infested with chemicals and filter some of that out before it gets into the waterway, or in your case, your lawn.
Okay, so the deer question. Well, we always get the deer question because, and this is nothing is deer, some these perennials tend to be more deer resistant to it than a lot of things. But we tell you that if you're planting a tree or shrub, if you get the oak or the chokecherry and you have a deer issue in your neighborhood, which almost everybody on this call probably does, then you should cage that at the beginning, because it doesn't, it definitely will run the risk of deer browse. Amazingly, the plants that are grown in the, from seed, the perennials, they tend to be a little bit more deer resistant. But I'm going to leave. I mean, we had somebody comment on the last time we did the presentation that, she ended up fencing her garden because otherwise the deer browse everything to the ground, and they'll do the same thing with with trees and things. So it really does depend. But I will tell you that I think perennials that are grown, native perennials that are grown, tend to be more resistant than a lot of things. But
yeah, part of our written instructions will include a section on how to deal with deer, because that is a problem in this area, especially if you live in an area where you have a deer problem and also a very big invasive species problem. So I know in my yard behind our house, overrun by deer, and they've eaten everything native and left all of the invasive species to overtake. And because of that, our native gardens will get chomped potentially. So that's something, either put in a permanent fence around it, or as it's growing, you can put in just a simple sticks and string fence to keep them away. The smaller plants are really going to be most at risk because they can just mow them down and not have a chance to grow, but established plants that are full grown should have an easier time dealing with deer browse.
Yeah, those are good points, Leah. And the other thing that you can contemplate is, I personally have had some success here at home with the various deer sprays that are, that are organic, but they're sort of smelly. Nobody likes it when I spray them outside,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah.
do work to deter the deer. The thing I will tell you is that you sort of have to be pretty regimented in terms of applying that. So if you have big rains and things, the most success I've had with that, keeping the deer off my new plantings, is doing it, every few weeks, and just staying pretty regimented with it. And then I've been pretty good because, this is a tough time of the year for deer. Obviously they're chomping anything they can get their mouths on, but come the middle of the summer, there are other options. So, but it really does, the deer issue is it's almost varies neighborhood by neighborhood, and a lot of it has to do with whether they're, you got a deer population that's sort of confined to your neighborhood, and they just wander around and munch everything. Yeah, deer, I mean, unfortunately, we don't have an answer for the deer population, because it is the other element of why we have such an invasive problem is the deer are so detrimental to our woods and eating new growth. When your plants are established, though, they are going to be a lot more deer resistant. But Leah's points that you'll want to do some protecting of them in the beginning, because any new plant is exposed when it's trying to grow.
Yeah, and this
And I
goes a
think,
little bit for rabbits as well, especially with
yeah,
the tree saplings, is rabbits for small saplings, they will just sometimes true right through the bottom. So it's important to have good netting around your tree sapling to keep it protected as it grows.
okay. So I think that's all the questions on chat. Um, and so we've left the order instructions. So hopefully you're interested, and we're excited to be a part of this whole Bring Nature Home concept. Doug Talamay's also called this the Homegrown National Park. So it's again, it's instead of wringing our hands and getting frustrated at all the negative pieces of the news that we see, to me it's sort of when I deal with something like that, I ask myself, what can I do? And this is something we all can do. And if we all did it, again, it's modest. If we all did this modest thing, I think he talks about if we have 40 million acres of yards in this, and so if we all converted a quarter of our yard into something native, then that's 10 million acres, and that's just an enormous amount of habitat that would really start to turn around this process. So, or this trend, this negative trend. So again, it's grassroots. That's what we're trying to do here. Hopefully you guys will be early adopters, and then you'll be ambassadors if you have this garden. I guarantee people are going to come by and they're going to be, wow, that looks great. What? Tell me about that. And hopefully next year in your neighborhood you have a couple more. And it's not going to start overnight, but it's got to start somewhere. So, well, thank you then, Katie. Thanks to Northland for hosting us. We appreciate everybody's attention, and be happy, because I see the end of the winter and I see the end of the pandemic. So it's going to be a good spring.
Thank you so much, Ken and Leah, for a wonderful presentation. And for everyone, in case you didn't get any of the links that Leah provided or get a chance to scan the QR code, I will be sending out a follow-up email with that information. So no worries, you will have the link in your inbox tomorrow in case you didn't get it.
Okay, well, thank you.